Okay, thank you very much. I'm Laura Forti. I'm a delegate for culture of the Jewish community. Yes, it works. No? Yes, it works. Do you hear me? Huh? Okay, okay. I am the delegate for culture of Jewish community of Florence. I'm here to talk, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Thank you all. To talk about Balagan Cafe experience. Balagan Cafe is our summer festival, and what is particular, it's a festival managed by a Jewish community, so it's a bit different from what you saw before. The Jewish community of Florence boasts, as is well known, a great synagogue built in the second half of the 19th century to be suitable for what was, even though briefly, the first capital of the newborn Republic of Italy. It's striking, as you can see. Its distinctive green dome, the third highest after the Duomo and San Lorenzo. You see the domes, one and the other. Yet, for all its imposing character, for many years it has kept a sort of low profile, not completely recognizable as a part of the Florence landscape. It was uncommon until recent times for Florentines to refer to it as the mosque, la moschea, because of the Moorish architecture, betraying the fact that at least some of the Florentines were not very sure about what it was and who it was there for. Obviously, the opening of the Jewish Museum, which opened in 1981 and was extended in 2007, was the first step in changing the state of affairs. But the decision to open up the garden of the synagogue on Thursday nights for what was called Balagan Cafe in 2012 was a major turning point in this history. The garden, this is the synagogue by night, it's gorgeous. The garden, which you see behind the gate, was once open and accessible to passers-by, forming a square in front of the synagogue, which, though privately owned by the community, was not wall-offed and secluded. But after the events of the early 80s, probably someone remember what happened, the Rome shooting with the death of the 3-year-old Stefano Taché, the child, and the wounding of tens of Jews coming out of the Sukkot celebration in the synagogue, and then the shooting at El Al terminal in Fiumicino airport, which quite understandably changed the security parameters of all Italian Jews, this gate was closed, and a security post provided and manned by the Questura, so independent of the Jewish community, was built right next to the entrance, and the garden became totally inaccessible to those who didn't participate in the community services. As said, in recent years, the creation of the Jewish Museum opened to the public some parts of the synagogue and the garden. And since the creation, the very important creation of the European Day of Jewish Culture, we had large crowds pouring in the garden and synagogue to enjoy a single day, but a full day of events, music, culture, food. But the major turning point, though, was in summer of 2012, when, together with Enrico Fink, the artistic director, the president of the community, who at the time was Sara Cividali, and Sandra dell'Ostrologo, the secretaria of the community, we decided to open the garden on a weekly basis during the summer, creating Balagan Cafe. And the response, as you see, was immediately much superior to our expectations. Week after week, Florentines and tourists arrived regularly in increasing numbers at the garden gate, submitting themselves to a security check, queuing to enter, and finally spending a few hours with us, attracted by a regular event which included a talk or book presentation, food, a concert, as well as guided tour of the museum and synagogue in cooperation with Coop Culture, Anna Di Castro, who now we will speak after. Coop Culture is one of the leading cultural cooperative in Italy, our partner in Balagan Cafe project. Rapidly enough, Balagan became one of the Florence main events during the summer, with an average of 500-600 attending every Thursday night, which peaked well over 1,000. National and international, thanks Ruth, press covered us, and we were able to obtain funding from the local municipality and regional council. Some pictures, you see people in front of the synagogue, the gorgeous synagogues. But aside from its success as a culture festival, what I think is relevant here is the complex status of Balagan Café as a project designed and carried out by a Jewish community, and an Orthodox one. I will not go into what is Italian Orthodoxy because this opens up to many issues. We have reached this past summer our 5th year, so obviously the political balance inside the community has, until now at least, proved in favor of Balagan. But it hasn't been always easy. No, it wasn't. There is a sort of a natural conservative aspect streak in a community like Florence, where many members feel part of a continuous history and always compare today, usually unfavorably, with what happened in their parents' and grandparents' time, with the tradition. And certainly, having 500 or 600 people, in large part non-Jewish, obviously, in community that numbers below 1,000, eating, drinking, dancing, sitting on the lawn in front of the synagogue is something that would have been totally unthinkable a few decades ago. I won't tell you what we had to go through when we positioned a beer tap in the garden. There is actually people that stopped speaking to us, that actually insulted us as those who have sold out the sacred temple to the vulgar masses, that had turned a place of worship into a public market, even though we actually never used the inside of the synagogue. Interestingly enough, most of this criticism was of a, let's say, sociological nature, something to do with sense of propriety and dignity, not with religion. For example, we had almost nobody discussing Kol Isha issues or asking for female singers not to be invited, luckily. Also, the 3 weeks mourning period before Tisha B'Av was brought up as a problem almost only by the rabbis, not by congregation. During these 3 weeks, we experimented in some years with non-musical events or simply remain closed. Another big point of contrast was the political question. You see, Enrico Fink, a Jewish musician, then there is Emad, who comes from Lebanon, and another Arab musician, and I arrived to the point. In the past years, a culture festival has an artistic direction that is reflected in the artists invited, in the themes dealt with in the events. But a Jewish community in Italy, on the contrary, is a sort of umbrella where every Jew belongs, irrespective of political opinion or point of view. Balagan was from the beginning devoted to outreach, to dialogue, relationship with the society. For example, we devoted many events to our role as one of the minorities, composing the Florence society, sometimes collaborating with other groups, from example, from the Georgian communities to the Peruvian association to, and here the problem emerged, the Islamic community. In the past years, Florence has had a tradition of very good relationship with the local Islamic community. Rabbis and community leaders were very outspoken in requesting the city to vote for the construction of the mosque, for example, which is still an open problem in town. And Balagan happily worked on this, having members of the Islamic community come and cook the food with us, celebrating the many activities that we do together, like children workshops devoted to education towards diversity, the fight against racism. This is me speaking with Women for Peace, an association of Jewish and Arab women who, I forgot, you see there, they cook together, they prepare chalot and Arab bread together. They cooperate together in a very simple way. All this, for example, became very complicated during the 2014 war in Gaza, when the voices against any collaboration with the Muslim world, voices naturally present in an open community, became very strong and pointed out Balagan as the image of buonismo, collaborationism, up to being self-hating Jews, all kind of this kind of stuff. But, for example, in the middle of the Gaza war, the Italian communist newspaper Il Manifesto, notoriously anti-Israel, and with, let's say, a complex is an euphemism, it's a very difficult attitude towards the Italian Jewish community, came to Balagan and published a 2-page article in the national edition praising the Florentine community, presenting a very different image of Italian Jews to what would have been otherwise, which was, for us, a very good result. But some people, for example, saw Balagan as friends of the enemies, in this case. We actually always dealt very positively with Israel. We sometimes receive help from the Israeli embassy. We do program with Israel. But that was not enough. During the war, for example, some people would have wanted us post-Israeli flags everywhere. And since we wanted to keep a low profile on political issues, we were seen always as the stronghold of liberals, hopelessly left-wing. So you see, we have to, for many conflicts and contrasts. The support we had, on the other hand, focuses on the many positive aspects. For the more religious, there is certainly the issue of kiruv, or reaching out to Jews that haven't distanced themselves from the community or that are simply staying for a while in Florence. Florence in itself, it's a small community, its hope of surviving, of not disappearing like other small Italian communities, rely on the Jewish presence that is always strong in town, in the university, in the commercial field. So this outreach is very important to us. But the main aspect, which in our opinion is significant in Balagan as a Jewish community effort, is the energy it is capable of creating within the community. This is an aspect easy to overlook, but when community members are involved in setting up and managing events such as these, participate in the catering from food preparation to serving at the food stalls, come and perform the security checks, or just set up the chairs, they become stronger. They represent the community to the outside world. They tell their own story to our neighbors, and so find a sense of community. I would say of pride in their own diversity and culture. They become more motivated in being part of our Jewish world. Definitely something very different from what happened in the Florence Jews' grandparents' time, but something that is, we believe, necessary to the continuation of this long history in these very different times.